right? Now let us look at a scenario where you have 10 columns, right? And you just want to read in 2 columns. You don't want to read in all the 10 columns. So one way to do this is again use the call underscore types argument, and then use the list function, and then specify the data type for 2 columns that you want to read in, and then use call underscore skip for all the other columns, right? Which means you will have to specify call underscore skip 8 times, right? So there's an easier way to do that. Instead of specifying all the columns that must be skipped, we'll just specify the columns that must be read, right? So let us see how we can do that, right? Here we are trying to read specific columns, right? Again we will deal with the same data file, which is hsb2.csv, right? And I'm going to use the call underscore, make some space here, right? So we are going to use the call underscore types argument again, but instead of using the list function, instead of giving a list of the data types for the columns, now I am going to just give the columns that must be read in, right? So I want to read in, say, let me say I just want to read in 2 columns from this file. So there are 6 columns and I just want to read in 2 columns, which is read and write. So I'll use the calls underscore only function instead of list. What this will do is it will give the names of columns that must be read in, right? So we are not going to say anything about skipping columns here. We're just going to say, okay, all the columns that have been specified here, you just read them and leave out the other columns. So I want to read in the read column. So I'll specify the column name followed by the data type and the write column, right? So again I'll specify the column name followed by the data type. Now let us read this in, right? So again you can see here it just read this 2 columns. So we had asked reader to read 2 columns. Okay, we specified the name of the column that must be read in followed by the data type of that column, right? Here read and write, and both of them are call integers. So when you're using calls underscore only, specify the name of the column as well, right? So you should know the name of the column and you should also specify the data type of that column, right? So this is better when you have, say you have 10 or 20 columns in your data set and you only intend to read 2 or 3 of them, or say 3 or 4 of them, right? So that you don't have to keep on specifying call underscore skip for the other columns. Now in case of skipping columns, it is better to use that when you have, say, 10 or 20 columns and you just want to skip a couple of them, right? So use call underscore skip within the list function when you have a large number of columns and you want to just skip a couple of them, and use the calls underscore only function when you have a large number of columns but you want to read in only a couple of them, right? That way it will save you a lot of typing and also save a lot of mistakes, because you don't have to keep track of the number of columns that you have to skip.